Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Right On In. Just like in that plot tutorial I did last week, I am coming at you with my morning coffee today because I, like you, maybe am just ready to get through this. I hope that this video finds you well wherever and whenever you are. And yes, I just made a Dark Tower reference, so extra points to you if you understood that before I even said that. If this is your first time here, we are more than halfway through getting our novels ready to go for National Novel Writing Month in November of 2020. Birds are chirping today, they're super excited, it's early morning, let's get right on in. So for those of you who do not know, my name is Andrew J. Stillman, and even if you are watching these videos outside of the October-November 2020 timeframe in which they are published, these tutorials are still designed to help you out anytime you're ready to write a book. I, of course, am at the helm of this little tutorial novel writing experience, writing a book of my own, and I'm using that book as an example book just to show you how to put all of these exercises that I'm giving you into use. I'm actually pretty excited about my book personally because if you have watched these videos, you'll know I had no idea what I was doing coming into this. There's all the other videos covering all of this already, so if you want to look through any of the topic or other tutorials, they are all included in the novel writing playlist on this channel. Before we get started on today's tutorial, if you haven't already, please hit that little subscribe button down in the description box, followed by that notification bell so you can be updated anytime I post a new video. Today, we are going to be focusing on building up your setting. Whether your setting is real or fictional, today we are going to cover ways of strengthening that setting so in 2.5 weeks, when National Novel Writing Month officially starts, you are all set to go, especially if you stuck with me during these tutorials. So with all that out of the way, let's just get started. First of all, what is a setting? Simply put, the setting is where your book or chapter or your scene or whatever is physically taking place. State, town, house, that type of thing. It also changes scene by scene because, I mean, right now the setting would be my room, but in a minute I could go film downstairs and then my setting would be in the living room. So scene by scene, the setting always changes, obviously, just based on where the characters physically are. Usually some sort of main location is at least determined for the overall setting where your story is going to be taking place. Like, I mean, if we're thinking about like a Harry Potter over here, Hogwarts would be like one of the main settings, and then like the Gryffindor common room would be a setting that was in a scene, you know what I mean? Even if you're writing a fantasy novel and your characters are gonna go out on some crazy quest and journey where they're just gonna explore the entire world and you're gonna have all these different terrains and villages and whatever, what have you, there's still at least usually some sort of main location. In Game of Thrones, think Westeros and Easteros before we get into the 100 gajillion other locations that are in those books. Now, I'm gonna be upfront before we move any further. World building is my least favorite thing in writing a book. Also, world building is usually the term used for developing your setting, but it's predominantly used for fantasy because you actually have to literally build a world. So I mean, honestly, think about that for a minute. You are building your world, and everything in it has to make sense, whether it is made up or not. Also decided you didn't need to see my email, sorry. Even if you're using a real world type setting, you still need to develop your own use of voice so that you can bring that location to life. And as just stated, I am not a fan of world building as necessary as it is. Everybody has their pros and cons, their strengths and weaknesses, and I feel like I've been pretty open about some of that on my own journey so far. But if I haven't been, I will strive to be more so in the future. Especially following up on my video about connecting with your inner voice a few days ago, I think it's really important to figure out and determine what those strengths and weaknesses are. That way, when it comes to something like developing a book, you already know which areas are going to cause you much more of a headache than others. That might not exactly sound too encouraging, but I honestly think it's really important to determine your shortcomings so that you can figure out ways of strengthening them and bringing them up to the same levels as your strengths. Next week, at least, we get to start moving into a few writing tips, and I personally get to cover my favorite thing about writing, which is actually dialogue. And with that being said, this is actually the last of these type of tutorials that'll be coming out for this month, and we've now covered the characters, the plot, and the setting. Or at least the setting will be by the end of this. And since I am also writing a dark fantasy for my book this year, I too will be focusing on creating a world from scratch. Yay! I'm also going to talk about a few ways to strengthen some real life locations, but honestly, if your novel does happen to take place in a real place, especially if it just so happens to be a location where you live, then it's honestly way easier to develop because you've already got a wealth of information literally right out your front door. The truth is though, the things that you do for your made up world are also things you should focus on in the real one that exists around you. But we will get to all of that in just a minute. And I am also going to go through a little bit of this beautiful baby that I have to show some of the world building that I have done in the past. This is for that ill-fated series that I've mentioned a few times. I don't know if you can see it, but if you've ever seen a map hanging on the back of my wall, it's mine. Here's the original that I drew for myself, and then I had a friend who scaled it up for me. But anyway, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I really don't want this channel to be too much about me, but that folder I just showed you is just the most prominent example of novel writing that I have. Trust me though, we are definitely not gonna go through that whole thing because ain't nobody got time for that. Even me, I don't even know what's in there anymore, shoot. While we were on the topic of my personal content, if that happens to be something that you are interested in, I have my personal channel linked right down in the description box, so go check me out if you want to just hang out with me when I'm not in a host. Alright, so since not everybody is writing a fantasy novel or has to build a world from scratch, I'm gonna go over some real world techniques to help build your setting. This will also work if you are building your own world, especially if you're doing some sort of crossover fantasy where some of or all of your characters either go to or come from Earth at some point. Thus, the crossover of that genre when the worlds cross over with ours. So here is the first thing that I want you to do with your setting, whether it is real or fake. Think of it as a living being. Hear me out for a second. If we think of the word noun and its most basic definition of person, place, or thing, we can take the same idea of that noun representing a person with a history, a personality, and a uniqueness about them that sets them apart from everybody else, and apply that to the idea of our setting. This is truthfully one of the biggest reasons that I choose to travel. Which, yes, we are going to be talking about travel on this channel at some point, especially for those of you who are asking me about that based on my trailer. But I recommend for every writer, especially those in the fantasy genre, to travel. COVID times dependent, of course. Traveling, however, does not have to mean some crazy, grand, huge, epic adventure. It's the same kind of principle we're taking about with writing books and reading. Not every idea has to be a novel. Not everything you read has to be a book. Not every traveling experience has to be some wild adventure. It can be something as small as picking the closest town that you haven't been to that isn't more than an hour and a half to 2 hours away, then going there. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to assume that you have been to at least one other place that is not where you were born and raised. If you have not, then I highly recommend you hop in a car, drive 30 minutes until you hit the next town, then 15 minutes there, drive back. Wherever you have been, think of one or two places now. What was different about them? Was one perhaps a city, the other somewhere deep in the forest? How do those different locations affect the senses? Perhaps the city is full of noise, honking cars, screaming people, construction work everywhere, permeated with the smells from all the different restaurants, peppered with buildings and houses, and filled with something of a little more frantic and busy lifestyle. All of that again, pre-COVID. You then could consider the forest setting, which is likely much more quiet, disrupted only by the occasional chirp of a bird or the rustle of a lizard in the grass. And the smell represents the sap within the trees, the pine in its purest scent, the taste of unpolluted oxygen, with a more appreciative relationship to the nature around you. Were there mountains in the places you visited? How did you feel being in mountain settings versus flat? What do you prefer about where you like to live? Are you more of a city dweller or a forest taker? Why or why not? Thinking about things like that for you in your day-to-day life help you give your characters similar thoughts and feelings toward their surroundings. It's not that they consciously need to be aware of all of this, but it's just one of those things where if you, the author, knows, then you'll be able to figure out ways of weaving that all into the text. It's kind of almost similar to what you hear about physical descriptions with characters. Instead of telling me someone has a long blonde braid, you could say something like, her golden braid met her belt at her waistline, or something like that. You'll definitely need to think of something better to say when you're actually writing, but that's just the example that came to mind. And again, right now we are only in first draft territory, so bleed it out, baby. Okay, so with your setting then, instead of saying there were a bunch of trees and mountains, you could say, he wondered what the trees would whisper if only they could. The tales the mountains would tell as they molded from the quaking earth, shaping itself beneath them. Not all of your writing necessarily has to be so flowery, but I'm just throwing out some of these random types of examples that also go with people telling you to show your work instead of tell your work. Okay. So we are going to develop and name a couple of places, if you haven't done that already like me. And then we are going to make up or embellish upon at least one piece of history from at least one location. We're going to discuss the political affiliations of the citizens, religions that do or do not exist, physicalities, the whole nine. This one probably, maybe, potentially might be the longest video. It's at least the longest transcript of the videos. But for now, we're just gonna start with the name of the place. Especially if, again, like me, you haven't done that already. Okay, so I showed you all this fantasy name generator when we were doing the character tutorials. And I said we were gonna come back here when it came time to name our settings. Like in that character video, and what I didn't say, and I'll just say it again and reiterate it now, use this as a guideline and not necessarily to actually pick the names that you see. But I'm gonna go here to place names. I'm just gonna take a minute to look through really quick. Cave names, that's gonna be perfect for me. Because if you didn't see my plot video, quick little recap. They're trying to get out of a cave that's hidden underneath some beautiful city because they have powers and they're slaves and there's all that kind of tropes. So I'm gonna do city names. Ooh, perfect. Fantasy town names, ghost town names. I just like that. Utopian city names. And then I'll do forest and fireland. Let's look through all of this. Oh, I don't like that. I think right now I'm gonna do Laniswell Hollow for the caves. Alright. Fantasy Town. Raillavare is what I'm gonna do. That is gonna be the town name. Raillavare. So that's gonna be the town that this all happens. The cave that they are stuck in. And then I think Hardmore is gonna at least be where my main character is from, Veda. Okay, well I'm just gonna leave that like that for now. I know I clicked on a bunch of places for potentially a lot of names, but I've just got the cave name, where they are trapped, the city name that they are under, and then the place where my main character is from. So I'm gonna go forward just with that for right now. So now let's talk about some history in these places. Have fun. Just remember that you, the author, have full reign over what has happened in these places that you are making up, if they are in fact made up. If you're working with real locations, then just read up on your actual history and either think of or choose a story that you think would actually benefit your story now somehow. Even if it's just something like, oh, this tree over here only exists because so-and-so planted it when they founded the place. Doesn't have to be very exciting. This is, again, just the idea of developing some backstory for your location the same way that you would do for a character. You don't get yourself a folder looking like this if you don't put any work into the development of your world. And again, in a real life sense, while I utilize the generators like this to just kind of help give me some ideas, what I normally do when I'm not just sitting on camera and stories come to me like the normal sense is that I just put letters together until I have a name that I like. This is just way faster. So now I'm just going to write out a brief little history, the same as that kind of 3-paragraph mentality I have for other exercises through these tutorials. And then I'm gonna figure out how some of those events connect to the story and how it works. This also allows you the time to establish any rivalries or bad blood that might exist, especially if it is crucial for your story. It doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, you could think of something like the San Francisco Giants versus the Los Angeles Dodgers type of rivalry thing. Maybe that's just the California boy and me using that as the first example, but that example also goes into my own personal character development because it shows how my surroundings and settings have influenced my thought process from the way that I was brought up. See what I did there? Okay, for now, I'm just gonna leave it with that. I personally will go through and at least develop the cave that they're all in later on, and that'll be included with the stuff on the website. But now that I have at least that brief history for this city, I'm gonna move forward into the political system. Couple of things. First of all, don't roll your eyes. It's fine. This political system, the book doesn't have to be political. It's again just something that you, the author, need to know. And number two, you may have seen that I also haven't named the world itself yet. If you were reading through what I was putting on the screen, and I will get there. That's all I wanted to say. Okay, back to the politics. And we're not going to actually discuss politics right now, but in your world, it still has to be determined how the public functions. Again, with a real setting, you can just write in the real political affiliations that exist in wherever you are. Or if you are writing some sort of fantasy, horror type story or whatever, you can feel free to switch things up a little bit. If you're writing things in a world where things are basically the same, but not. Either way, it's just important for you to either know or determine how the political system works. Is this a democracy or a monarchy? If people do vote, how so? If it is a monarchy, how has that been established? If you're making this world up, try and associate with and research as many different political affiliations that you can. But if you are just making things up, I mean, just remember just that. You are making this up, and anything you say goes. This also briefly foreshadows next week's topic on imposter syndrome, but for the purposes of this video, I just mean that making things up can make you feel like you're being fraudulent because what you're writing isn't true. But yes, it is, because you say so. Unless you're trying to write a non-fiction story about a zombie apocalypse, that is. Although, hey, 2020 is not over yet, so anything goes. Best of luck. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and just develop my political system here really quickly. And if you have been watching what I've done in the past, you'll know that I am looking a little bit into Hinduism for the mythology aspects, especially since my main character shares a name with like the original like source of knowledge. And a lot of what I have so far has just been developed from the caste system used in Hinduism, and I'm gonna develop that more later on, but I'm basically just gonna write that down for now just so that I have something. Alright, another thing I would like for you all really quick, especially if you do have Scrivener, and how earlier on we went through the characters and I haven't done it yet, you see, but how we had the little questionnaire here. You can do the same thing here on Scrivener for the settings if you'd like. You've got the role in the story, related characters, the season, unique features, description, sights, sounds, smells, and notes. So again, right now I'm just gonna do the political system. It's not gonna be much. I'm just gonna bold it and write based on Hindu caste system. And I know already, based on that system, that the people who are trapped in this cave, these characters that I have developed so far, that they are referred to as something called the Dalits, which is like the untouchables, like cast out from society. And for now, I will be doing more development on this when I get closer to the writing of everything. But again, for now, it's one of those things where as long as you just like list it and know it for yourself, it's what is important moving forward. Because I just know that everything is going to be based on all of this, even though I haven't completely finished all of the research necessary to make it actually happen. So especially for those of you who are writing some sort of high fantasy or medieval fantasy type setting, you're really going to want to know how the royalty works here. And then for those of you again who are writing fantasy like me, you're gonna want to figure out how magic works into all of that. We are gonna talk about magic, but it's gonna be last, especially for those of you who are not writing a fantasy and don't necessarily want to sit through that. But like with all of the other tutorials, there are timestamps down below, so feel free to go ahead and skip forward to that if you haven't already. But look here, now you've got some sort of history and politics and whatever set up for your world. Are you as excited about that as I am? Next up, we're gonna talk about developing the religions. Now I hear it, I get it, it's fine, I hear you. The two things that you're not supposed to talk about are politics and religion, and that's the two things that I've already like brought up for this world. But the same as with the politics, it's important to know it one way or the other. And we are making things up here today, so again, anything you say goes. Unless you are writing some sort of real story, which at this point I don't even know why you'd bother, because it's way more fun making everything up. It's just that like the political systems, it's important to know what religion or religions your people subscribe to. And it is also important to note that despite whatever affiliations you may or may not have, that fantasy books often tend to deal with some sort of creator in some way or the other. If you've seen my review on the Queen's Executioner, you'll see me talk a little bit more about that. But there's usually some sort of creator or karmic force at play. And if you think of something literally like the Force from Star Wars, or if you've ever read Elantris by Brandon Sanderson is another good example of that. I will be talking about him more when we get to the magic systems, but that Elantris book has also had a lot of influence on the one that I'm currently writing, but it's just been a long time since I've read that book. So even if none of your characters or not a single person on the entire planet believes in a god or subscribes to any religion, or if everyone's just agnostic, it's still just important to determine that. You may also find, and I might feel a little bit blasphemous for saying this, but it's just the experience that I had. You may find yourself going through a little bit of a god complex when you are creating these worlds. I mean, you can take whatever theory you have on creation and make it your own. It's like what we've been doing for everything else. Blank screen, finished product. You are merely the creator of the events as they occur. Okay? And as for me, like I just did a minute ago with the political system, I'm just going to write based on Hinduism for my religion, because I am still doing some research into all of this, especially after discovering the Vedas, which I talked about in my plot video if you've seen that. But my main character is named Veda, and I discovered that the Vedas are like the original texts, like the first text, and so I'm doing a lot of research on my own end of things to help influence all of this. But then this is again what I'm trying to say about it, just determining right now as opposed to really developing these religions or political systems, unless it's something that you already have like well thought out. Time for a bonus tip. Determine the currency of your world and figure out how it works. In one of my little towns, in this big folder I showed you a minute ago, everything works on the barter system, and that was a really fun thing to develop and look into. It's just like with everything else, just try to challenge yourself to think about money from different perspectives, to try and determine how the characters feel about it, how they react to it, and what its necessity actually is in your world. So next up, and last up, for those of you who are dealing with Earth type settings or non-fantastical type books, is to set up or decide on the physicalities of your location. And before we get into this really quick, I actually have a quick little travelogue that I would like to share that has really changed my idea of perception, especially when it comes to setting. We were on a trip around the United States. We were in North Dakota, and we were talking about how boring it was because of how flat it was and how there wasn't really all that much going on. And we took a tour of the Capitol building, and it was me and my friend and then this couple from Washington. And again, I'm from California, so I'm a West Coast boy at heart. And while we were on this tour, the gentleman from the couple from Washington made some comment about how boring North Dakota was because of how flat it was, and it was a sentiment that I agreed with, and as did my friend because he's from New Zealand. But then the tour guide said something that really shook me and changed my perspective. She said that she grew up out in the plains, and when she went outside and looked across the flatlands, she saw freedom. And when she came over to the West Coast and visited the mountains that we had grown to love, she felt very caged because it was like the ground had come up and was like around her and made her feel so little. And that, I'm still like shook by that because it was the biggest like shift in perspective I think that I've had when it comes to actual physical setting and physical location. Because again, I was literally there thinking, wow, how boring is North Dakota? She tells us that story, and all of a sudden I'm like, wow, this is not so boring at all. It's all about perspective. So this is just another reason that I talk about the importance of traveling and how it can affect your writing, because this particular story is one of many that just help me approach characters and settings and their relationship with each other and all of that just very differently, because it's all about perspective. One person thinks this field is boring, another person thinks that this field represents freedom. One person thinks a mountain range is the most incredible thing in the world, another thinks it represents oppression. Just try and think about that when you're approaching your characters and your settings, because this again goes back to that whole showing instead of telling and you can show it through the perspective of your character, especially since we're already thinking of our settings like people, remember? Okay, for me, I'm just gonna give a couple of physical traits to the Laniswell Hollow Cave, because I've done the history for the city. I'm not gonna do as many of the physicalities in the city, because I don't really think I'm going to be seeing the city. Those of you who do or do not know what I'm writing, basically the first third of the book is gonna be in darkness. So that's a challenge that I'm giving myself, is to really see everything through the perspective of my main character, who physically cannot see anything. So it's all about touch and smell and all of that other stuff, and hearing and anything but sight. So I'm just gonna give some physical traits to the cave that would then, I hope, you know, help him out. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and just leave that up on the screen. If you want to see anything about it, just developed a really dark and dank cave. How fun. So finally, out there, the last thing that we are going to talk about, especially for those of you who are writing in the fantasy genre, is good old developing a magic system. So if you have read what's on the screen, I'm gonna take it away, and if you haven't read it, it is available over on my website. Follow on over if you want to see this and all of the other writings that I'm doing for this project and more. Alright, so magic systems. Actually, I'm gonna go top up my coffee real quick. And there we go. And just to answer in case anyone is asking, yes, I drink my coffee black. I'm such a rebel. Anyway, magic systems. These can be simple or extreme, depending on what you're working with and depending on what you want. My first recommendation is to essentially just read anything by Brandon Sanderson. Specifically, I would say either Warbreaker or Elantris, the one that is influencing this book. If you like big, epic, thick read books, Stormlight Archive. But the Warbreaker and Elantris books are good books because they're just standalone, so if you don't want to get too involved in 1,000-page books, then go for those two. Warbreaker especially sees us looking at the use of color developing a magic system, and I'm certainly part of the group of readers who thinks that that series needs to continue. Of course, that's not at all what any of this is about, but Brandon has really good advice on developing magic systems and world building on both YouTube and his website, all of which, as everything else, will be covered and linked in the description box. To quickly state, however, what those three laws are. Number one, an author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. Essentially, you can't get a character out of a bind just because of magic. It can't be an excuse. It has to be a system that's already in play that the reader understands. That's another thing that I discussed in my Queen's Executioner review, because that specific law, rule, or whatever you want to call it is something that I felt was lacking. Most people, however, will immediately associate this idea with something like Harry Potter, where that magic system makes sense. Number two, limitations are greater than powers. Basically, don't make people invincible just because of magic. Even a character who thinks they're indestructible has to have a flaw. I'm just gonna stick with the example Sanderson himself uses on his website in this law, and that is talking about Superman and Kryptonite. The limitations are what actually keep the reader interested. They're what the writer sets in place to keep the reader reading and to keep the drama and the intrigue going. And number three, expand on what you already have before you start to add more. Don't just keep making stuff up. make more work for what you already have. These have just become really common examples of how to build magic systems, because that is one of Brandon's biggest strengths and kind of like what he's most known for. He's not the only example, of course, but I wanted to include the development of a magic system with the development of your setting because of how the magic should interact with your people in the book, especially in whatever version of modern day society you have. As with religions, different people can have different opinions on magic and the magical systems. So perhaps your characters need to work in secret, or perhaps magic is very predominant and there's something of a caste system based on magical ability, which again is something like what I'm going to be examining and developing throughout the novel writing process for myself. Whatever it is, you need to figure it out. And again, make it up. Just make it make sense. And then again, as for me, some of what I am telling you, I'm just wanting you to keep with you throughout the novel writing process as opposed to making it all happen right now. Like for me, developing the magic system especially is gonna come more once I actually start to write out the book and get to know the characters. It's just a baseline, something that I already have in the back of my mind. Magic exists. This is how some people feel about it. This is how other people feel about it. This is the effect of what it's had, why I have characters who are imprisoned, stuff like that. Finer details of everything are gonna start to come out when you actually start to write the book in November, but that's again why I say just don't get too stressed about it right now. It's just about knowing for yourself, if nothing else. This is the religious system, this is the political system, this is the magic system, etc. And just having a one-sentence definition for what each of those are, even if it's like what I wrote about based on this, that's all you need to do for right now. But skaboom! I at least now have my genre, my characters, my plot, and my settings all ready to go, and I am officially ready to get right on into my novel in November. Are you? I do still have some more advice coming. The next few videos are going to be more about actual like writing technique and grammar advice kind of stuff. But spend some time revisiting these exercises that we've just done over the last couple of weeks for the next couple of weeks, and then you can just get everything that you've already done polished up a little bit so that you too are ready to get right on into your manuscript in November 2020. And once again, if you are starting to get that itch to just get right on in right now, try to ride that itch out until November, unless you really think that you can get started now and continue until December. Remember that the whole point of Nano is just to get into the habit of writing every single day, not as much about ensuring you hit that 50,000 words, but between November 1st and November 30th, that is obviously the primary goal. You can also officially announce your novel over on National Novel Writing Month, so if you haven't signed up already, go for it. The information for all of that, like everything else, is right down there in the description box. And while you're down there checking out all of those links, you may as well hit that little subscribe button, because I am having so much fun with all of these videos, and I am super excited for all of the people who have joined me on this journey so far, and all of the people who are going to join me in the future. Piper. If you have any questions at all, as always, please feel free to ask me in the comments, either here or on my website. My email address is also linked down in the description box. But just remember, first draft stages. That's all we're at right now. So don't try and get too stressed out about everything before we even really get right on it. If these things that we've been covering in these tutorials are starting to stress you out, just make a couple of bullet points for each thing that I'm saying, because again, you don't have to really get too far into this development right now. It's just to get you to start thinking about all of this stuff so you don't get caught up when you start writing your book. After you write out the first draft, or maybe once you simply just get started with it, you'll find it easier to revisit these exercises, because then you're gonna have an idea of what's actually going on in your book. And again, that's for me something that with my magic systems and politicals and religious and all that other stuff, that development will happen more naturally and a lot easier once I actually start to write out the book. So don't stress. And once again, I am so excited for you to be taking this journey with me, and I hope you are as ready as I am to get right on into whatever book you're writing. I am getting antsy myself, almost like waiting for Christmas. And next week, we are going to be talking about surviving imposter syndrome before we move into some writing tips. And then, it's time for Nano. I hope you're getting ready. Enjoy your world building in the meantime. See you next week.